Hello and welcome to this week's Sunday Conversation here on Big Country Politics. I'm Manny Diaz. This week our special guest is Ryan Goodwin, chairman of the Taylor County Republican Party. Ryan, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate you being willing to bring us in and allow us to talk about this.
Yeah, we have a lot to get to. We want to get your side. We want to get House Representative District 71 Stan Lambert's side of this, and we will as well. First and foremost, tell me as we kind of begin to, we will unpack a lot of that stuff. First and foremost, tell me, I guess, as you see this legislative session come to an end, what were your thoughts? What were the thoughts of the Taylor County Republican Party, kind of how things shook out in an overall scope?
In an overall scope, I think there was still a lot of room left on the table. I mean, we were really disappointed at the very beginning when David Cook didn't become the Speaker of the House, and we got Dustin Burrows in because we felt he was more conservative. But what you're going to hear is the most conservative session ever. But I think we left a lot of room on the table. I mean, there's a reason Greg Abbott is calling everybody back to session again to come back, because I think, overall, I do think it was more conservative than we've seen. But I think there's a lot of room for improvement, especially when 88 of the 150 people in the House, you're Republican, work together, get the platform done.
Yeah. Was there anything that you felt passionate about, the Taylor County Republican Party felt passionate about, that perhaps didn't see the light of day when it came to the legislative session?
Well, me personally, and I do think I hear our precinct chairs, which is our executive committee, say the taxpayer-funded lobbying. Mm-hmm. That just didn't seem to take off, and we see that influence so many areas. And so for a lot of us, I know we were disappointed. I was super disappointed. I was like, bring it back to the table. In fact, I was hoping our governor would say, let's talk about this some more, but I haven't seen that yet.
Well, speaking legislators, you guys, the Taylor County Republican Party, this group made a pretty bold decision, and this is, y'all made a heavy move here. Y'all decided to censure House District 71 State Representative Stan Lambert. Tell me what that means for the folks who just have no clue about politics. I know that the
Right.
people are going to nerd out about some of this stuff, but for somebody who has no clue, tell us what that means.
Well, so kind of the first thing that I want people to understand is the Republican platform, I think, has like 249 different little sections that we value. However, when you censure somebody, you can't go after all of that. It's just a short list. And so you have legislative priorities, which there's 8. You have principles, which there's 10, and then a paragraph that's a preamble. And so out of all of that, basically we're able to say, okay, how did Stan do compared to those? So we can't go after school choice. We know you flip-flopped on that. I know a lot of people are mad. We can't go after something like the last session had with that hospital monopoly that everybody's livid about. It has to be in this session. And basically we're able to look at these and say, how did he live up to him? How did he vote? So we look at his voting record. And so I know he's a nice guy. I know everybody loves him. He's connected to everything here. But we don't look at personality or anything like that or relationships. We say, how did he vote? And so that's what kind of led to this, is we were watching his voting. And we decided, okay, did he honor these things? And we were starting to watch him really early, because in one of his town halls, or the only one he had, he called the Republican platform a wish list. And we're like, no, we have expectations when you run in that seat. When you put the R by your name, we expect you to run like a Republican, to act like a Republican when you get up there. And there's certain values that come with that. I mean, there's a reason why. So for us, we felt that Stan would be better running as an independent, and he believes Abilene will vote for him, and that's, if they vote for him, that's great. But when you get the R by your name, we believe that comes with something. I mean, we all get together for convention, we vote on platforms. We don't always agree on the 250 things that are on the platform, but when it comes to legislative priorities, there's only 8. And those are the ones pushed up to the top, and a lot of us agree on those. And so we have expectations for our candidates in those seats.
I want to get to the next move now, because certainly this is just, a resolution?
This is a resolution. So basically this is being brought forward to the SREC.
Okay.
There's 64 members. And so they'll get to look at this. This will probably drag on until October.
Okay.
So this isn't a quick deal. So everybody's talking like it's going to feel like this is going on forever.
Okay. So I'm going to put a pin in that. Tell me, before we kind of talk about the next move of that, But what are y'all? When we boil it all down, what's y'all's beef with Stan Lambert in terms of how he's voting? If y'all have a grocery list, if you will.
We have a grocery list, and we've been careful not to let it all mix up because we have the 250 things, which we see a lot of violations that he's done. We've been careful to stick on these 19 deals. But one of the things I can say, and I feel like people understand, is like the Texas Tribune put an article out where you had the most conservative to the least conservative. Out of 87 people, there's 88 Republicans in the House, but the Speaker doesn't count on this. He's ranked number 83, least conservative. There's only 4 people that are less than him and I guess more liberal than him. So you're talking about when we look at just kind of how he's voted, even the Texas Tribune, which I think that a lot of Republicans are like, hey, hold on. We read things and we're like, I don't know how that came across. But basically, when we look at his voting, we're disappointed because it doesn't match up with our platform. And, Taylor County voted 74% for Trump. And then we have a representative that's the bottom 5 of the conservative Republicans. And they're just at the very bottom of the list out of 87. And we're like, something doesn't add up here. So a lot of us were saying, I think, Taylor County is a lot more conservative than what's being offered here. And we believe that he doesn't honor the Republican platform. And so that's kind of what led to our decision here is we saw these violations. We were watching him, and we were kind of thinking, man, come on, we deserve better as Republicans.
Were there some certain things he was voting on that kind of displeased y'all, if you will?
Yeah, so right at the beginning, a lot of us were displeased. And in the town hall, he mentioned he hadn't really talked to David Cook, which was the guy that the Republicans were pushing to be Speaker of the House. Right. So you have 88 people that are Republicans, and the guy that kept on winning and actually won the nominee was David Cook. Well, Stan Lambert went and teamed up with the Democrats and took a small minority of the Republicans, took Democrats, and that select group allowed the next Speaker of the House to come, which became Dustin Burrows. But the Republican nominee was actually another guy that had, I feel like, stronger Republican values. Now, that's debatable, and we have a session that just happened, and everybody says, well, it's the most conservative session ever. But could you imagine if we actually went with the guy that was actually voted in at the nominee and how much more conservative we would be? And so we actually had to team up with Democrats this session. Republicans and Democrats teamed up. And you think about the Speaker of the House, we talk about the calendars committee, what actually comes to the floor. The Speaker of the House is responsible for that. And now you've just made a deal with the Democrats. You teamed up with a bunch of Democrats and Republicans, and all of a sudden what hits the floor is a little bit different than what I feel like would have happened with Cook. Because when you have 88, you get in there and you all agree together, you talk together, and then you really can control where things go. And so for me, I know a lot of us were disappointed with that. We were also disappointed with how many vacation days that they took right at the beginning. It felt like forever before they even got anything passed. And meanwhile, the Senate's knocking it out, and they're saying, well, it's because there's less people. But, I feel like when you have more people, you can get more things done. And committee appointments took a really long time to get done. You see that things just move so slowly in the House that and for me, you're saying, well, that's the Speaker of the House. But when you vote on that Speaker of the House, when you refuse to stay part of the Republican caucus, you leave the third vote and try to you just didn't stay part of the third vote to vote on David Cook because you saw the writing on the wall.
Sure.
That's your guy. What he does is your responsibility too, because you help vote for him.
Let me ask you this. So, in the last election, in the primary, it was between him and Liz Case. The majority voted for Stan Lambert, not Liz Case. When y'all begin to censure Stan Lambert as a party? Are y'all speaking as the party, or are y'all speaking as kind of like the overall scope of the people that voted for him at that point?
So right now we're not going back to the last session. So this isn't like what he did with Ken Paxton, where he tries to impeach him. We're not trying to impeach anybody. What we are trying to do is say, hey, we need to look at our next election. And so we're not looking back to impeach anybody. We want to make sure that there's a Republican candidate that has a Republican values, that was willing to honor the platform, and that's the person that gets pushing forward. So that's what we really want to do. This is more, we're looking at this session, and we're deciding, hey, there's a lot of things that should have gone better. And we see violations, which remind everybody it's not over the whole platform. It's a small section. And that's what we're able to look at. That's what the rules we've been given. And so when we look at it, we're looking at violations this session. This has nothing to do with the last session. In fact, I'm curious to see kind of what happens with this. I mean, this is new.
Sure.
State of Texas hasn't done this. Other states have, but state of Texas has not.
Well, the majority voted for him. Do you think that they have the same sentiment as the Taylor County Republican Party, Republicans in this county?
So I believe when you throw in things like, I'm getting calls and I'm getting people running into me at the grocery store, there's times where I feel like I'd rather send my wife places because I get stopped so much.
Oh God!
And so, you know, when you really throw in what he did with school choice, and you know, flip-flopping and just how he moved forward, he's lost a lot of teachers. And I know that for a fact because they're calling me like upset, or they're talking to me, or we're seeing each other just randomly. And so I honestly believe that a lot of people are for this. And we're not just talking about that. Like, it feels like I'm seeing Facebook posts all the time about this hospital monopoly, and people are starting to see the impact of that. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, he says he's for Abilene. Was that hospital monopoly really in Abilene's best interest when the Federal Trade Commission had an intense, it was disputed. They were saying, don't do it. And so I think there are a lot of people, I think there's a lot of momentum for this. And I think that you're going to see that people are going to be very supportive of this. Now, of course, I do believe we're going to see a lot of Stan's well established here. He has a lot of friends. He's got to build a lot of relationships. He was a banker here, if I'm right. He went to ACU.
Athletic director.
Yeah, he did all these things. So there's going to be a lot of friends that are loyal to them. But when we look at these things, it's not about loyalty, friendship, because I think he's a nice guy. It's about voting record. And so when we look at these things as voting record, we believe that if people really paid attention to how he voted throughout the session, they would be right on board with us. They're going to feel bad. I mean, nobody wants to censure somebody. Nobody wants to, like, as a parent, I don't want to punish my kids, like, when they do something wrong. But there's that time where I have to do the right thing. And right now, we believe as a Republican Party, the local Republican Party, we voted on this rule. It's Rule 44 to censor. A lot of us were at convention. We voted on it. And we believe it's our duty to take this seriously and move forward.
You know, Republicans talk a lot about, you know, being democratic and things like that nature, and they rag on Democrats and saying, oh, well, they're quick to censure. Do y'all feel like this is you're kind of blending into that world a little bit, or do y'all feel that y'all have an honest concern here of how y'all need to be led?
I think we have an honest concern here. Of course, I'm going to say that, but I think we have an honest. When we went through this from the very beginning, and we started talking about this, we made sure that people understood what we were doing. The first thing I said is we need to stay transparent. You know, all of our meetings are open to the public, and so we post them online. We have calendars. We do a lot of Facebook stuff. You know, there's been a few times where somebody got sick and we realized something dropped. But we do make sure that we can keep as many people involved as we possibly can. We were on Robert Pratt talking about, you know, what we were going to do. And so we try to have integrity to where everybody's able to be part of every meeting, but that's our requirement. Sure. And so we put there, when we did this, we gave Stan a good, 10 days. We let him know, hey, we're going to do a censure. We would love for you to come talk about it, talk about why we're wrong on some of these things, share with us. And so he refused to show up, but I haven't seen him at the local Republican Party since I've been chair. And so, you know, he'd even come to the debate last term. And so when it comes down to all this, it's really hard to be connected to a guy that you don't see. But when we look at it, we felt like this is something everybody get on board with that actually did research.
Yeah. Last question for you, Ryan. What's the next step here? It's a resolution now. Where does it go from here?
So what we've done is we've developed this. We've honored all of the rules. The rules were pretty intense on this thing, and so how we wrote it, what it looked like, what was in it, and basically we've sent it to our SREC, which is 64 people representing the whole state of Texas. So it's the State Republican Executive Committee, and so they have a resolutions committee as well, just like local parties are able to make committees. The executive committee for state Texas makes committees. So this is in the resolutions committee. They're looking at it right now, and they have the opportunity to pass it to the actual executive committee for the state of Texas, the Republican Party. And so basically where it is now, it's in the hands of the Republican Party of Texas. They have the document, they have a recommendation, and there's two people asking me, what is your recommendation? I thought it was pretty clear, but we're looking that he doesn't run as a Republican right now, that he has a 24-month period to where he can't put his name on the Republican ballot. Now, this doesn't mean that he can't run as an independent. So while everybody says it's unconstitutional, we aren't kicking him off the ballot. We're saying that the person that runs as a Republican needs to have a jersey that runs like, you don't ask for somebody who doesn't vote like a Republican a lot of times to run in your spot. So we're asking you to wear the jersey at least, to when you go there, vote like a Republican.
All right, we're going to step aside for a quick commercial break, but when we come back, more with House District 71 Stan Lambert as we get his side of the story. That and more right here on Big Country Politics. Well, welcome back to the Sunday conversation here on Big Country Politics as we move on to our next guest, House District 71 State Representative, Mr. Stan Lambert. Stan, you have had a busy session this legislative session, and thank you for making time for us today.
You bet. Always good to be with you, and love to catch up and talk about what we accomplished.
Yes, well, I know the things we were talking about off camera. I mean, it's just a brain dump. Just what's in your mind and what's in your brain at this point, and it's not necessarily all about the legislative session. So we'll get to that. So bear with us. Nonetheless, let's talk about the session itself.
Sure.
Governor Abbott is calling you guys back in July for a special session. What can you tell us about that? And certainly, as you move forward with all that.
Well, I think the most visible and the obvious reason that we're being called back is to deal with the issue of the THC ban. Mm-hmm. As you know, Lieutenant Governor wanted a ban. He was adamant about having a ban. The governor never really voiced his opinion during the session about where he stood on that particular issue. So I think it was a little bit of a surprise, especially for the Senate, the Lieutenant Governor, that Governor Abbott did veto the bill that would have banned THC. How we resolve this is yet to be seen. I think the House had lean more towards regulation, mm-hmm. trying to put in some guardrails and make sure that our young people were not getting access to the consumable products that, whether they're gummies or some kind of liquid in a can or some other type of marketable commodity that has THC at a level that sometimes would affect the young minds that are out there. We wanted to make sure that was that we did something to prevent that from happening. And so, at the same time, we've got other constituents and other people around the state who depend a lot on the ones that are available to them, and have used those for different types of chronic disease or pain and joint issues and things of that matter. So we've got we've got a set of circumstances here where there are arguments on both sides. They're good arguments. And we'll just have to see where we can find some common ground, maybe in the special session.
For it to get to the governor's desk and for it to make that journey, that trek there, were you at all surprised that he decided to veto it in kind of the 11th hour here?
Not really, because he has used the veto pen in prior sessions for reasons that sometimes we really don't understand and can't predict with a lot of certainty. So the fact that he did veto it doesn't surprise me. He gave a very long response, as you might have read, about why he felt it needed to be vetoed. Again, there's a lot of good reasons, a lot of good arguments on that side. But again, on the other side is the fact that when we approved the hemp bill back in 2019, we basically opened the door for some bad actors to to misuse the program, to abuse the program, and that's what's been happening. And so, again, good arguments on both sides of the issue, and we'll come together sometime in July the 21st and start trying to figure out a solution.
To see him and Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick battle this out, is it almost like, okay, you guys do what y'all got to do? It's kind of, I'm not. It's well, the legislators, they feel they're backing away from
Well, the House will have a tremendous impact on what eventually gets approved and what does get sent back to the governor in terms of some kind of a compromise or where we find common ground. But so each chamber does have their responsibility in terms of how they address this issue, as well as 4 or 5 of the other issues that are going to be on the call for the special session. And he still can add additional items between now and July the 21st to that call. So we really don't know yet to what extent, how large this agenda and how many other issues or bills we're going to be looking at. But certainly up to now, THC has been the main focus.
Definitely. All right, let's get to something that hit a little closer to home here. The Taylor County Republican Party, earlier this month in June, they decided to basically send out a resolution to you to censure you. And this is something that could impact you and your ability to run as a Republican in a future election. Before we kind of, get into the nitty-gritty of all this, tell me about this. How did you find out about this? Was there any dialogue between you and the Taylor County Republican Party?
Not between me and the chairman of the Republican Party. There's been no dialogue other than a phone conversation we had back in January, just 2 or 3 weeks after the session began, where I defended a couple of votes that I'd already taken about the speaker, who was going to be the House Speaker, as well as some rules that were being proposed for the House to operate under. So no communication until I came back from Austin. The day after I came back, there was a certified letter in my mailbox. Welcome back. And, oh, by the way, we're going to meet next Monday night and have a meeting to censor you, and you're welcome to come and defend yourself. So I had other plans. I had other commitments. I wasn't able to attend the meeting, but that was the gist of the conversation or communication that was provided to me.
Ultimately, Ryan said in our first segment that, he felt Stan is a great guy, nice guy, but isn't, up to snuff when it comes to being a conservative. In your mind, what is a conservative, a true conservative?
That's a great question, and I don't really know how to answer that, except that I've been voting Republican since I was probably 2 or 3 years out of college, so that goes way back to the 1970s. I have always voted in the Republican primary. I've always believed that government should be limited, that we should be frugal in terms of how we spend the resources that the taxpayers provide us for government services. I've always been a pro-education advocate, obviously, from my background and being involved in the school board here locally. The interesting thing about being censored on 10 items, basically, that I didn't vote the way the Taylor County Republican Party said I should have voted. I voted 3,700 times in this last session. I made approximately 3,700 votes. 10 votes out of 3,700 is less than half of 1%. So the way I look at it is they agree with me on 99.5% of the votes I took. Or maybe they just ran out of time or maybe they ran out of paper in terms of how long they wanted to make the censure letter. But it's interesting to me that the 10 items I voted not in the way that they wanted me to vote ranged all the way from the Speaker of the House vote, which was at the very beginning of the session. I voted my district, which I felt have always done in every vote I've taken. I always think about what's best for House District 71. The Speaker candidate at that time was Dustin Burrows from Lubbock, a West Texan, a very conservative Republican. Some have said even more conservative than the other candidate who was running for Speaker. That vote was taken, and then another item on the agenda that they called me out for was one day I missed being available to vote because I was sick. So the range of issues that they're calling me out on and asking the state Republican Party now to rebuke and reject the application that I will file when it's time to file to run again, which is in December, that is enough information that they feel compelled to censure me. Censoring's not new. Censoring's been used in other parts of the state, other states, but using it to reject or rebuke someone and keeping them from running. I'm not a lawyer, so I don't want to be too legalistic here in terms of my interpretation of the Texas Election Code, but I have not seen anything that I would say this is going to support their argument. Everything basically says that I can run, that I can be on the ballot, and that there's no legal or judicial methodology that they can use to prevent me from being a candidate next March. So I'm not too worried or concerned about what I think the final outcome is going to be. It's kind of a distraction in a way in terms of what we're here to do, and that is to come back to our district and talk about the session we just finished and the special session that's going to be coming up here in just 2 or 3 weeks, and talk about the successes. We had so many good priorities that were passed this session. Water, some of the water bills and legislation that we passed that are going to start this process of identifying future sources of water for Texas. That's so important, and the money that we're appropriating to get that started. Property tax reduction, border security, all of these other things that have been so important to Republicans and are part of the Republican priority platform, we've done. We're continuing to do that, and I voted 99% of the time for those things. So it's this 1% or half of 1% that evidently I'm being told you weren't Republican enough for us to be able to allow you to be on the ballot. And so it's going to be settled in court. There are going to be lawsuits filed, I'm sure. And my consultants and my attorneys that we're talking to at least say they don't feel like this has any standing.
You mentioned December and next March. Do you plan to run again?
My name will be on the ballot.
That's and I know that's been kind of a question, as you.
Well, I think I've told you before in this meeting and in your podcast that after every session, I take a little time off to kind of review what has happened, what's transpired, and usually that takes 2 or 3 months in the summer to review the successes we had, where we didn't have success, or where we failed to get the bill across the finish line. And as a family, we kind of regroup and kind of say, are we still making a difference? Are we helping House District 71 in West Texas and rural Texas the way we said we wanted to when we first started running 10 years ago? And so we'll do that evaluation sometime here in the next few weeks, and the special session is going to kind of put a little bit of a crimp in that process of kind of evaluating and deciding, but we'll know something by the end of the summer.
What's that been like in years past? I mean, do you know of anybody who's been censored that was ever of a sitting state House representative or state senator? Oh,
sure. I think they've been censored. There's been censoring done quite a bit, but as far as taking it to the next step of saying you cannot run and you will now be denied your application to run as a representative of this party, I think this is going to the next level of their attempt basically to say, we can't beat you in a normal election. We didn't beat you last time. Even with all the endorsements that my opponent had and the money that flowed into this campaign, they can't beat me in a normal, regular election process. So this is now the tactic that's being used to try to keep good, responsible Republicans from being able to serve their district and serve their constituents.
I've heard things of you voting with Democrats, and that's something that they've talked about as well. Take that. How do you? What's your response to that when it comes to that particular issue there?
Well, 2 things. Number one is that the reason I vote with Democrats is because we're going to have 17 constitutional amendments this November, and for any bill or piece of legislation to get onto the constitutional amendment calendar, you have to have 100 votes, Manny. You have to have 2/3 of the House. We only have 88 Republicans. We have to work with Democrats. We have to have Democrats come over and support some of these issues. One of the biggest issues that I worked on this session was making sure that Texas State Technical College has the resources available in a permanent endowment for them to grow their campuses and expand throughout the state of Texas so we can grow our workforce, which we are in so much demand for. That required 100 votes. We got 129 votes, so we have to work across the aisle. The other leverage that you might say, the Democrats don't really have a lot of authority or a lot of power. We took them out of being chairman of any committee. A few of them were elected chairman of subcommittees, but I can tell you as chairman of a committee, those subcommittees really had no power, no authority to decide which bills were heard or which bills got voted on. The chairman of all the committees in the House were Republicans, conservative Republicans. They were the ones making decisions about which bills moved forward, which bills stayed silent. And so the leverage that Democrats have, though, and they used this a couple of sessions ago, is that when we started talking about an election integrity bill, they walked out. They broke quorum. And when you break quorum, you can't do anything. You can't meet as a committee. You can't vote. Your hands are tied. And so you always hear rumors a little bit about, how far can we push the Democrats before they holler uncle and decide to leave and break quorum, and then we don't get anything done, which they've done in the past. Usually over hotbed issues, hot button issues, involving maybe abortion or pro-life or some of those main issues that they really fight against. So those are two reasons why there's good reasoning, there's good logical, common sense reasoning to try to keep Democrats working with you so that you can get your conservative priorities passed. Now, in many cases, the negative votes on some of those priorities are all Democrats, but many times 20, 30 Democrats come over and vote with the Republicans.
You made mention before we went on air about early voting and how that was kind of something that was being kind of looked at, the potential of eliminating early voting altogether, and then moving everything to day of. But you decided to stick with early voting.
The bill itself changed 2 or 3 times during the process of going through committee and then coming to the floor and then with various amendments that were offered and so forth. But the gist of the bill was basically to accommodate more of our urban communities in the way they wanted to structure their voting process. It really did not take into account the issues that our rural counties, particularly Taylor County and others, would have if we made those changes to the election process, and particularly as it related to early voting, one-day voting, voting in person, eliminate vote by mail. I mean, just a lot of different issues were involved in that. And so when it came time for an actual vote to be made, I voted against it because I thought it was going to hurt our rural communities. And so, it may come back up. It may surface again. A lot of times these bills kind of fall off by the wayside, and then the next session, here they are again. Nearly 9,000 bills and House resolutions were filed in this session. Only 1,200 made it to the governor's desk. So a lot of the bills that never did get a hearing in committee, maybe never did get traction once they got out of committee and went to the calendars committee, maybe they never did get to the floor, they'll come back. And so many times I find myself, oh yeah, I remember this bill from 2019 or 2021, and I voted against it then. What's changed? Tell me what's made it better. What's improved? And so that's a normal way of how some of this legislation. It's the old adage of you're making sausage, and it's not fun. It's not pretty. It kind of stinks every now and then, but it's the process we go through to try to ensure that the bills that finally do make it to the governor's desk are good policy. And we don't always get that 100% right. And that's why he has the power to veto some of the bills that he saw related to criminal justice and some other issues, water districts and things like that. So it's a process. And you go back and forth and you work with other representatives and trying to understand what they're coming at you with and what they want to try to achieve and accomplish. And yet sometimes you agree with that, sometimes you don't, and you offer suggestions on how you might improve your bill, or if it still comes in that form that you just can't agree with, then you cast your vote against it. And that's what I did on the election bill.
You made mention, Frida Reagan, God bless her, and every time I see her, all that she has
Well,
to go through on election day and
yes.
through election cycles and things like that. I imagine there was a conversation with her about something like that.
Well, we have ongoing conversations throughout the session with Judge Crowley, with our mayor, with others that are in elected positions. But our elections folks do a fantastic job here in Taylor County, and I would say in 98% of the rural counties around Texas, they have good people just like Frida, who organize and are very efficient in the way they run the election process, the way they deal with questions and answer questions for constituents who have issues involving the rules and how the procedures are run. But we have a really good setup here in Taylor County. And so, we listen and we try to represent the constituents that talk to us and make good sense. And where it sounds like, that's not gonna be good for Taylor County or Nolan County or Jones County or Callahan County, then we're going to try to represent those constituents and vote accordingly, even if it doesn't match up with the state Republican Party platform. So I'm going to vote House District 71. I always have and always will.
So even if the state says this is their recommendation, you'll always lean back here.
The state party.
The state party. I'm sorry.
Absolutely.
The state party.
House District 71, the 194,000 people in House District 71 are who elected me. They're the ones that write the big check every month for me to go to Austin and serve. And it's not going to be 11 people who take a vote on a Monday night, 6 days after I come back from Austin, who are going to decide whether I'm going to continue in this job or not.
Last thing, as we land the plane here, if you say your law team says that your legal team says that this could be open and shut in your favor, perhaps. When you have to work, if you have to work with them again, because it's inevitable not to work with this Taylor
Sure.
County Republican Party.
Absolutely.
Would you be willing to continue to open up with them and work with them and moving forward?
Of course, and we're always open. We've always they like we've said before, they send us their priorities. We watch what they're most interested in as far as the bills that are going to be coming forward. We have conversations ongoing, and we answer their email as much as we can. Although during session, things get a little bit hectic. But those channels of communication are always open. We can agree to disagree and be respectful and be civil about it. But I just thought the way that this censure process transpired was more or less not recognizing the fact that 99% of the time I'm voting the way they want me to vote. It's those very small 1%. But when you've got 9,000 bills filed, 1% can start adding up. But call me, talk to me, email me. Let's talk about it, instead of just waiting until the session is over and then saying, we're going to censure you.
Well, Stan, I appreciate your time. Welcome back to the 325.
It's good to be home.
From the city that is weird. It says they're weird, Austin, Texas. So
Even bumper stickers. That's right.
yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. All right. For Stan Lambert, House District 71 State Representative, I'm Manny Diaz. This has been another Sunday Conversation here on Big Country Politics. We'll see you next time. God bless.